Exeter TV needs to start recording this. We'll do a quick roll call and then get into our one agenda item tonight. So, roll call, Mark.
Mark Layton.
Here.
Peter Leonard here.
Amanda Kelly is here.
And Chris Weeks is here. No, of course it is not. So I guess let's get into it. So this mainly for the chief's and Dave's benefit is, this is our kind of working session to figure out what we wanted to say in reply to the presentation that we saw last Thursday. We'll get into exactly what we want to put out there. We're thinking just questions, comments, recommendations for additional information that would be good, and next steps and that sort of thing. So you're welcome to sit through all of this. We'll probably, if it's something that we want to hand off as a letter, we'll probably try to craft it as well as we can today in this meeting, and then so that way we can vote on it and all that good hooey.
But it might be just a list of X, with a, like our report, just simply X with a one-line letter.
Because it's feedback we want to get back as soon as we can, and we're thinking if we do it now, we don't have to wait till our next meeting to do it. We'll probably skip our next meeting if we can get it all done and approved here in public. And then we'll go from there. So, and we'll try to, anything we need from you guys, we'll try to get it early in the meeting here in case you need to jump or go somewhere else. So with that, let us commence. What do we want to say?
Let me
And I'll take notes for today.
Do you mind if I just set the strategic framework that I was thinking of?
Sure.
In this paper, since everybody's got the paper.
Yeah.
Again, not intended to force a decision by any means, but I think that we have to think about how we can be most helpful in a strategic sense to the town, as well as in terms of applying the expertise on each member of the committee. I've seen enough to say that only option one is a reasonable high-end option. I think Holland Way is out because of its distance and the issues of being over on that side of town. And I think the second option about the 17,000 new square feet in 24th Street is just too expensive, and Holland Way is too expensive. I think option one's too expensive, but I think we need to think about if we recommend a menu of choices to the town. I think we should do that. I think we should say, hey, here's 3 or 4, whatever choices, and see what kind of public pushback or comment we get. And I think that we need to think about changing option one as a second, in other words, a new option, if you will. And that's what the first bullet was, the first entry. It was just a new option. It's what it is on the paper. It's $12.9 million. Okay, that's different. That's the best. If option one is the best, then this is the less best, or good. I also think that we need to deal with the issue of the police leaving downtown, because we know that some people in the public are going to do that, are going to comment on that. So I think we should come up with an option that has the police stay downtown and show people what it is and isn't. And if they think it's a good idea, even though it doesn't have enough parking spaces in the best of all worlds, that's fine. But they may also say, hey, no, we don't think that there ought to be any presence downtown. It's not worth it to us to build a suboptimum police department. We prefer to do the best police department out on Continental Drive. But we won't know that unless we have an option in front of them that shows them what the choices are for the police department downtown. And so that's why there's another option in there that says, the 3032 Court Street. I think the sooner we can come up with a menu of options that represent the not least worst, but the less best, or the good, better, and best, the more we can focus the consultant's work to get us the additional information we need to actually decide among those three, as well as to deal with the public comments that are likely to come in and see whether we can build support for one of those 3 or 4 options that we present. I'm concerned that we go back to the consultant and say, yeah, answer all these questions about options 2 and 3 as they are here, when those have, I believe, both politically as well as fiscally, very little chance of getting approved. I think that's a waste of the consultant's time, and I think it's a waste of the town's resources. So, this is one example of an attempt to come up with a mix of best, not as good, downtown, to see whether or not any of that was even acceptable to the chiefs, and whether or not it kind of made sense, recognizing that the best is going to be the enemy of the good in this entire exercise. And we have to figure out if we can find what the good is, or if the best is the enemy of the good, and the good, we have to find if there's a good enough. And I don't know what that is. And Chief Poulin just saw this paper when I sent it out on the week or yesterday. And the option of taking 3,000 square feet out of 6 Continental Drive, that was arbitrary. It was just an attempt to get some money out of the project. It only yielded about $970,000. I'm not here to tell you that it's worth taking 3,000 out to save that small amount. But anyway, so I think we need to start asking the kinds of questions about operational capabilities and costs and what they can live with and what they really want and what's the most important to them as soon as possible, so that when we are ready to have the next public meeting, it can be a full-throated discussion by the public. They can say, yeah, I really like that, or, oh man, I really hate that. And so this was just my attempt to come up with a continuum of options. Now, I appreciate greatly that both Dave and Chief Wilking are willing to consider a lesser option for 20 Court Street. And I think that's really a step forward. Not that they were in a backward position before, but it's a step forward in attempting to try to separate the best from the good. And I think that really helps us, because at the end of the day, the chiefs have to be comfortable with what we do. And they're as much citizens of the town who are going to have to pay their taxes on it. And we're going to have to deal with the people who stand up. And you're going to remember this line, Steve, Chief. If we end up ultimately with an option that says it's less than the best, there's going to be somebody who's going to stand up and say, I'd be dead if it wasn't for the fire department. They should have everything they want. And our best defense to that is to say that we believe that, the fire chief's opinion, balancing his operational needs along with his financial needs, along with the town's financial capabilities, makes whatever we're recommending a strong package. So this is just one idea.
Let's move on.
Yep.
So, Chris, can I just, I'm not butting anything.
No, I was just going to say, so what other thoughts do people have on what they feel like the framework should be and what we should be doing?
Yeah, so I might suggest, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Peter. I would say that the biggest focus point should be is the program, because there's multiple options to meet that program. But at the end of the day, these guys in the town, Rustine, will have to defend that, right? So you don't want to go up and say, yeah, you're right, I can live without that. I mean, I think that's going to be really a lot of energy put into that. So you guys can just say, we've done this, we've gone through this, this is the bare minimum that we have, right? And and maybe there's options that we can say, this is the bare minimum, but this is something that we really think is important. And part of it is that, what these guys have looked at, which they're smart, is that they haven't looked at what they need now, it's the next 20 to 30 years, right? Which is adding some cost to that because you're trying to predict that. But so I mean, I just think that they're really, some of our comments should be really helping them defend and validate and vet that program so that all this, I mean, I think that's what you were saying is that.
It is and isn't in the following way. It's sort of like the issue of how much parking is enough. There's always going to be more program than the town is either able to afford or can afford.
Well, let me just say, when I say program, so there's always different categories of program, right? There's programs that you absolutely have to have, right? And then there's going to be things that it's, whether it's a code-driven or it's a recommendation, that would be like, well, and some of these things aren't necessarily big cost items, that there may be that it's, the size of the vault needs to be this, the recommendation is this, but the bare minimum is, there's different things that go add. So, I think that there's going to be, when you develop this, and I think that's why it's important that they show what is now, what they have for size of offices, size of cells, and whatever, all the different stuff that you guys have, how it should be, what the proposed program is, and then justify why are we asking for more if we are, and what are those, you know what I mean? So, I think it's...
Yeah, I do, but here's the problem. And that problem's not the right word. If Chief Wilking, putting words right in his mouth, if he's willing to live with this first option, then my attitude is he's made the judgment that the most important operational priorities and program priorities can fit in that first option. We don't need to shepherd a process through that's going to establish some requirements that at the end of the day, no matter how much we believe in or how much we think are valid, are not going to get past the town. We've got to figure out the best program we can get past the town if we want to make any progress. And if that's what you're saying, how do we find the best program within an affordable limit or an affordable envelope in the building? That's fine.
No, I'm not saying that because I don't know what affordable is. And what I don't want is, what I don't want, my opinion is different than yours and the next person. Right?
Yeah, right.
But what I don't want is to have to settle. And I understand the risk of all this stuff, but I don't want us to have to build something that we're going to get one shot for the next 50 years. I mean, how old is the public safety complex now? 40, 50?
41, 42?
Yeah, so I don't want us to be, saying, well, we can only afford this, and then in 5 years we keep seeing warrant articles that we need an addition, we need this and that. You know what I mean?
I understand. I agree with you.
Right, it's the DPW situation that they have down there with their administrative building, right? They can only afford this, and then the first year that we're...
I agree with you. We're gonna draw the line as to how much is enough differently, I think.
Yeah, no.
And the chiefs are gonna have to be the best source of advice as we counter that. But I'm willing to say already, and since I'm a short timer, I can say this. If I can build what he needs, and he's told me what he's needed, again, words in his mouth, $12.9 million, then I'm going to throw over the side 22 million or 21 million immediately because the town's not going to be willing to buy more than what the chief's willing to say he can live with.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean,
but the process where we got to is that the chiefs working with MRI and working with LaValley, what was presented is what they need.
No, what was presented was what LaValley told them what they needed.
We can debate that.
Okay.
Because, and the chief he's not going to say, yes, Peter, I can go with your notion, because he needs to consult with the Valley and MRI and say, hey, what does this do for us operationally? So he can't just say, this is where we're gonna go with
I
this.
didn't come up with it.
No, I'm just saying, you have a comment?
Yeah, after you're done.
Okay. I mean, I appreciate your focus on the budget and what you think is a palatable number to the town, but we're just not there yet. We gotta work
I
through,
got it.
we gotta work through these notions, not notions, but these options and present those to the town, and then, based on that, we can work on numbers after that.
Well, I'm sorry, Dave, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just color this in a little bit, because I had talked to the town manager about option one, which we both felt, and I think everyone felt that it was probably the most viable option out of the three presented by the Valley. And just like what we looked at it, but there was no reason to put a number. I mean, these are rough order of magnitude, but I'll go by, the $20-something million for option one, right?
Yeah.
We weren't going to put that on the ballot in 2023. The reason being, it's just like, it's analogous to someone that pulls a home equity line of credit for $100,000. They're going to build an addition for $50,000. When the addition's done, they're going to renovate their existing space with $50,000, right? You don't go and you pull out $100,000, build the addition, and then 2 years later, use that $50,000 that you've paid the debt service on in 2 years and go back and do it. You pay $50,000, build the addition, then it's done, then you go back. So we envision separating these two.
Yeah.
And when the realization, when the town manager, like, that's how we would approach this for CIP, for budgeting, for just fiscal, common sense, if you will, we're like, okay, well, how about have LaValle Brenzinger as part of this, because we're going to have a couple years when we, assuming we put the first, that's what we, say we get there, it's a police and a substation on Continental, and we put the warrant article and it passes. We've got a couple of years to build before we looked at fire, right, at the 20 Court Street. What I was proposing is have LaValle Brenzinger look at that and look at the program, the chief's program, and see how it fits in that existing building with the additional space from police.
Right.
Just seeing how it fits, because that has not been done.
Right, to renovate an existing, not tear off part of it that's being proposed.
Not tear off part of it, to renovate, or just move just see, like,
That was what Peter was asking you the other day, so,
Yeah.
but so to me, that's exactly where the point was, what I was trying to get is that you have to validate, vet the program, and then there's multiple ways to solve for that, right?
Correct.
Whether it's just renovating to, like you were asking, you renovate the existing core or shell, and it meets the thing, or you validate the police program, and it's a pre-engineered, smaller footprint, 2 stories instead of 1 story, whatever. There's different ways to do it. I don't like how they did the estimating, to be honest with you. I think that they've overinflated it, which I think
That's
is
another point I was going to make.
Yeah.
As they refine the design, we'll get better numbers out of the estimate.
But I even think right now that they should flush out a lot of stuff, right? I mean, I like how they did a range, but they shouldn't have thrown an escalation the way that they did. I know they but I mean, this is my opinion, so because I think automatically it's getting to this big number because it's 2025 values, and all of us got a sticker shock when we started to see these things, right? But just I wanted to make, so I agree with you as far as I think that once we vet the program, which I think as us, I would recommend that we advise and push and say, have you thought of this? Has anybody else looked at this? Have you had another third party look at this? You know what I mean? What is other towns doing? Stuff you guys have already done probably, but just to help to say that we're not building something bigger than what Portsmouth has done or something. You know what I mean? It's not a good example because they're different than us, but I think that would help all this stuff as far as us trying to just to get understanding of what these things are, right? What this means.
And we've got local examples, unfortunately not many, and almost none in New Hampshire, but there's a couple in Maine, there's there's one or two in Massachusetts, and I think it's worth looking at them because it's not Exeter. There's always going to be somebody who says, I don't care what they do. But they are data points that sure we should look at. Chris, I think what I push back toward what you said is LaValle Brenzinger is going to do what we tell them because that's why we're paying them. And even in the best of all worlds, if they're told, put the most program into these envelopes, that's what they'll end up doing. just because they came up with these three options doesn't mean they're all worthy enough to continue to consider. It's I believe it will be diverting our attention from answering the questions that we're going to come up with on the first point. And secondly, it would divert their effort away from, at the end of the day, and we'll all disagree what those are, but what other options may be out there that are viable, regardless of what LaValle Brenziger did. They've done their job. I mean, they spent half our money, and they did a good job. But now it's kind of, we're stuck with the where do we go from here? And just telling them to go back and do more on
Nobody's doing that. The next step for me is, one, it would be great to get some public feedback, and I'm not sure how that happens, but before we try to, not just us, but you and you guys try to give LaValle direction. I know LaValle is saying, okay, give us direction on what's the next option. What can we really focus on for an option? I really feel like that's that public feedback that we were looking for at this point. Just to get some feedback, just for the public to become.
You want to get public feedback on three $20 million options?
Well, so before that, though, is there an intermediate step, though, that we can, now that there's some options, before we share pricing, or not we, when the town shares pricing, I mean, is there a way to get some public input on the meat of the options, not worry about the pricing?
The program, the location.
Yeah, just to say that this process has developed a couple, and maybe this is a survey, Dave, that you've done in the past, just to say the town has developed several options, would love to have community input about option one, exactly what it says, not share price tags yet, just get the idea. And I mean, I honestly, my personal opinion is I'd love to see police stay downtown, and I understand, but to your point about showing the people what that could take to do it, I mean, that would be a more expensive option, because I think you could make it work on Court Street, but it'd be more expensive. I mean,
and it might be.
Right, but I would be interested in seeing that, because just my personal opinion, I might be willing to pay more taxes for something like that.
But we won't get that as something to consider unless we direct LaValle Brenziger to, instead of following all three of these options, to look at that as a possible case.
Yeah.
And that's, so.
But you could answer me, you could put the questions in a very generic way, like, here are the options. Would you be willing to support this if it was the most expensive?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You could do it that way, where you could just start to get a flavor from the community. Like, I mean, Dave, you've done a ton of these, so I mean, it's like just trying to get. And I realize that you're subject to how many people would actually be involved in this, but I think you get, if it's a very simple process like you did before. I think it was the traffic? Was it downtown parking or something like that?
Yeah.
And just say that this is an option. If it was the most expensive, would you still support it? If it's, what I mean? Just trying to see what people. If you said an option was to keep fire where it is, police over here, it could be. Would you support it? Yes or no? If it was the most expensive option, would you support it? Yes or no?
But okay, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I don't know why we don't have enough information to be more specific to get them thinking in a more specific way about what we're talking about. Because it's kind of hard to, and it's especially hard to ask them what they think of anything without giving them any kind of dollar estimates. Because their reaction is going to be, well, how much is it going to cost?
Well,
what's the impact on the tax rate?
No, I understand that, but sometimes that influences people's decision too, right? And
Well, but that's what we.
But I get it. But that's what you asked me. But it's important information to get, and I just don't think the numbers are where they should be. And so I think before people get all up in arms about where this is going to go, I think it's just valuable input. That it's more than us four on the committee to say, I think it's just trying to get other people to weigh their opinion and just put it very generic like that. Just say that. I mean, I think everybody that is following this knows that these are big ticket items, right? This is big. And I don't think anybody, maybe there are very few people that would say that it's not needed.
Right.
And it's just about what we think that people are going to accept as affordability. And I mean, these numbers aren't going to be far off. I mean, they're really not.
That's the thing.
I mean,
They're going to fine tune them, but we're not off by more than 10%.
yeah, I mean, it's not 50, we're not going to cut this in half.
No.
It's just not going to happen, right?
Well,
I mean,
unless we do major surgery.
but then at that point, it's not going to get, I mean, that's going to be what they have now.
No.
Except there'll be a different part.
No, 12.9 million is major surgery to me, okay?
If you're cutting it in half.
Yeah. I mean, that's, to me, and by the way, I don't know if the town will sign off on 12.9 million, but that's a victory. If we go to the town and say, hey, you know, we had 3 options, each of them was $20 to $25 million, but working with the chiefs, we think there's a viable option operationally for 12.9 million.
Yeah.
We just, I mean,
Yeah, if that's feasible. I mean,
Yeah, we have no clue if that's even.
Yeah.
That's why I said
Right.
have LaValle Brensinger
Yeah.
do the
Exactly.
programming in the building without
Yeah.
PD.
Yeah.
They have not done that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think that
That's
makes
a good
sense.
data point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but again, I think I mean, that can happen concurrently with all this stuff.
Correct.
We're getting, I mean, my opinion on what our job is to look at this as advising them, saying, can you provide this? You should ask this. You should research this. You should vet this more, or provide this to us so that we can ask more questions. Because I mean, I'd love for us to be the clearinghouse so that we could ask all this stuff before Budget Recommendations Committee does, right? Because they'll be asking a lot of these same questions that we're looking at.
not only that, if we come up with a wildly unrealistic number, even if it's the best of all possible worlds as far as program, they're not going to follow our lead. They're going to cut it in half. Trust me.
Yeah, I know what they can do.
They've already told the Department of Public Works that the best they're going to get out of a new garage is $5 million. Okay? I'm just not.
I know, Peter. I just
telling you that.
no.
But we don't. We are irrelevant if we don't confront in our priority setting, which is what we've been told we're supposed to do, the fiscal and affordable side of the house. I'm not saying we shouldn't ask more questions. I think we definitely do. But what I guess I am saying is that at a minimum, in addition to what Dave suggested, which would basically be the new compromise option number 1 on the top of the page, I think we need to ask them about some other options that go beyond options 2 and 3.
Sure, yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that this is it. I think if we have an opinion that, can you look at this? I think those are great options. I just don't want us to get too far in without getting into this and saying, you should have this and look at this. And because, I mean, no matter what, I just don't agree with the approach saying, oh, we're just going to we're pulling $5 million out of a hat and that's all you get. You know, I mean, to me,
I understand
you got to look at what the needs are. And I understand why they're doing it. It's just the fact that you get into the situation that we are now, that they have subpar facilities because somebody told them that you had to cap it at this. They're not looking at what the needs are. And I know that that's a pie in the sky because, people can afford taxes. I get that. But still, I mean, we can't just throw a number and say, you got 13 and that's it. That's not for us to say that. And so...
well, it is in terms of setting priorities. We can do that. But I understand what you're saying, Mark, and I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Okay? But we can do that. We can say in our best judgment, it ought to be a building that looks like this. And I mean, about this many square feet. And we think it ought to cost about this much. And that, to me, that's what the membership here knows how to do. But anyway, I think we're all in violent agreement.
Yeah.
So we should focus on what additional information we think LaValle Brensinger should provide. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, we can make a list of stuff we'd like to see from them, and then on top of that, what are the recommendations for next steps? I know you seem to be hesitant to put this kind of information in front of the public, but I think it's crucial to start the conversation and get their feedback. And then if they say it's too expensive, then in the next phase, we figure that out.
Would you share the numbers, the estimates?
Well, haven't they already been shared in some format? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a public meeting, so I guess it's out there.
I mean, if anyone wants the 91A request,
If somebody
give
wants
them everything.
if people get sticker shock, then that's a data point.
Yeah, but do you really want, well, I mean, if you just put if you're gonna put the numbers out, I would just put the top line numbers out. I wouldn't put down, a fire station, substation for 1.950 or contractor conditions, because then everybody and his brother is gonna argue about whether it ought to be 5% for contingencies or 10% for contingencies.
Well, what we could say is, to me, there's got to be a public presentation at some point, and I'm not sure how we get interested. And maybe it's just a website survey kind of thing, and just get feedback that way. And then part of what we could ask LaValle Brensinger, in addition to, doing that programming exercise on the existing building, maybe they can fine tune the cost estimating a little bit, just to take another look at that.
I mean, I just think that I think they should do incur your dollars and leave it at that, and then recommend. And then I would say, on that estimating is to have a larger range, but then also say, like, what are you getting for that? And if it's, I'm just rounding off numbers because I don't remember off the top of my head, but say the range is that option one is, 15 to 20 million. I would do a big range like that, and then I would say, the 15, the expectation is that it's this. And just because I think
they gave us a range.
I know, but it was
I know it's a lot.
But I mean, 23 or 23.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a concept.
So we're asking them to fine tune it to give us the best range.
I just personally, my hesitation on these, that this is a concept. It's somebody doing some square foot numbers based on what they've done.
Yeah, it's a price per square.
And and they're guessing what escalation is in 2023 and 2025.
And they're doing it at like 6 to 8%, I imagine.
At least, probably, right?
Yeah.
And so and I just feel like that it's just leading. It's just leading people down the wrong path at this point where we are right now. That's my hesitation with sharing numbers. I mean, to me, it's that there's just a lot more information that has to be vetted.
So if you established a wide range of values, so that at least going into a public presentation, you could say, these are really rough estimates that we use just to compare one option to another.
Well, exactly, right? That's what it is, just to compare the options to.
And then,
exactly
as we move down the road towards a preferred option, that price will get fine-tuned.
But again, if you give them three options, all over $20 million, they're going to throw up.
Well, that's why we asked.
Reject all of it.
We asked LaValle to go back and
for in a good way. I mean, they go, wait a minute, huh?
We asked LaValle to fine tune the cost.
Yeah, but you just said it's not going to come down more than 10%. So
probably not.
I mean, so it's instead of 21 million, it's 19 million.
Well,
we've still got the same problem.
Yeah.
So
if you took the escalation down, it's going to come down probably 25%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
just because that's what especially the 20.
Then we have to be ready to answer why we took the inflation out.
Well, I think we just have to say that this is current year, and then the LaValle is recommending an escalation factor of this. I mean, I think that just has to be communicated.
And which the way Dave is saying the project would be broken up, the second half of the project, the escalation could be much lower at that point, so.
Well, it depends on what the second half of the project is. I mean, if the second half of the project is the way it's this first entry in this page, then that's a much more affordable second part and a much more doable second part to give the chief, who's now doubled his space with both the 6,000 from the police department plus the 6,000 up on Continental Drive, to do the best program he can. Let me ask you this then. I mean, so we're gonna ask LaValle Brensinger to do option one from a program point of view. We're going to assume that old option one is already done from a program point of view, right? The first of these three that they gave us.
Correct. That was based on the program.
That was based on the program. And option two and option three were based on different constituent parts of the buildings. In other words, one was...
The only difference was 20 court, instead of saving a portion of it, ripping it down in all.
Right. Yeah, but that's not insignificant, A.
No,
B,
but that is the difference.
Right, and the third one is Holland Way.
Correct.
I think it's a waste of time and money to have them flesh out Holland Way and option 2 and 3 from the ones they did. But if you guys want to do it because you think that somehow or another those are viable options, I'm not gonna pitch a fit in it. I'll support you guys. I do think we should consider asking them to do the 3032 Court Street, just to see what it would cost and just to see how much program we can get. And then to try to identify, whether or not we care if the best is X number of parking spaces, X, then if all we can get out of Court Street is X minus, whether or not that's operationally acceptable and whether or not that's fiscally acceptable. So I think we need to put that on the table as a possible option.
I think we can, and we've got a couple weeks before the vote happens, so I wouldn't have them do anything until after the vote. Then we'll know if that's on the table,
What vote?
If the,
Yeah, because we don't know. 'Cause that doesn't pass.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's off the table.
Right.
So let's just wait. I agree, Peter, that was one of the things that I came out of that meeting with, is take another look at that to see what we can do with it. But yeah, let's wait a couple weeks before we,
So can we start drafting our list, because it's
Yeah.
just taking the time, I think. I don't know. You guys want to, you guys got more important stuff.
Well, I feel like the whole conversation went in a different direction I was expecting.
Oh, so you're here now? You might want to dinner though, right?
So
Like,
you had a bunch of questions first.
I think minor, it's minor, not questions, I think the requests.
Okay.
You want,
So-
you want me to type these up or send them to you, or how do you,
No,
how do you want to do this, Chris, as far as develop a
what is
list?
it, 5:36?
I got it.
Can I see it for him?
We're not going to read
You got it?
I don't know. Yeah, I can read that. Let me read
I
it.
can kind of read it.
Well, I don't know, that's not my,
All right.
Wait, that's my laundry list.
yeah. Wait, there was a list over here.
Before we do that too, Dave, any thought on that 32 Court Street? What is the town, what are you guys thinking? Mr., put your planning hat on and tell us what you're thinking about for that. Anything?
Well,
Pardon me. So my name is Eddie Contreras, and I was supposed to meet somebody for an interview with the Budget Committee, and I think it was at 5:40. So
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you know what room you were supposed to go in?
I think it's 6:40.
it's
Yes, it's
Look at the
6:40.
agenda for the, I think it's
For the selectmen.
no problem.
I think it's going to be right here.
It's going to be right here.
You got an hour.
This room.
Welcome aboard.
Go prep.
No problem. Here, listen to us.
Hey, no,
We have
yeah.
a visitor. Yes, we have one.
There you got one public member.
Okay.
I don't know if you, or if you
know,
care
I
to
mean,
share, that's okay.
Well, yeah, I'll, the town did purchase 6 Continental Drive with the intended purpose for a public safety, although it was always a fire substation, maybe not police, but it was intended for public safety use. Town of Exeter, going through this process, we don't own a lot of land. And the most valuable, I think, for future use is downtown. And got to be really careful. Police station's a great use, it really is. But we have another, if it was palatable to go out there, it makes more sense keeping this for a different use. And I don't really want to throw out those uses.
Okay, no, that's okay.
But it's an extremely valuable piece of property.
Yeah,
That is
just before-
extremely valuable.
Yeah,
Court Street property.
Correct, compared to the Continental.
Yeah, I didn't want to push
And-
that really hard
Yeah.
here if that's not,
But that's a good point, Carl. Don't you think that the people who would try to back the police department into somewhere downtown need to understand the opportunity costs and not specifics of Court Street? And so
32 Court Street.
32. So as we add that as an option and the Valley brings it or fleshes out, then somewhere in the analysis ought to be a discussion of the opportunity costs, so that people can make the value judgment that says, oh no, I insist that the police be downtown. Or, okay, I can live without the police downtown because look at all what's going to happen at 32 Court Street.
Yeah.
To the extent that we can predict the future and
Yeah, I
promise.
wonder how much that's going to drive the vote, though, the police downtown versus just the flat dollars and cents of the budget.
Well, I don't know, what do you think, Chief?
I think fire downtown, they've got all the data and the heat maps to support that. Us downtown, it's the feeling of safety, right? But there's also the double-edged sword of kind of that prison feel where if you're in a butter, do you want a police department right next to your property? Because we're bringing bad guys to the police department.
Yep.
And we're leaving there with sirens, all during the night, different times during the night. So there's that aspect to it too.
And that would be part of the analysis or part of the discussion. When people insist, well, police have to be downtown, then everybody who doesn't think that's a good idea can stand up and list all of those things. And presumably or hopefully, they'll be talked out of that. But I think well, by the way, I threw these community policing satellite things.
And I think that's great. I think that's great.
I mean, could you actually
give us a small little office anywhere, and we can definitely.
That's why I was wondering, like the 32 Core Street, if that became kind of like utility, I shouldn't say utility, but flexible space, office, whatever, maybe you could slip something like that in there too.
Right, but I wouldn't wait. I mean, what the hell? You can use this. You can use the cookie room over in the town hall. I mean, there's back when we had the Festival of Trees on a per person basis.
Oh,
next as you walked in is where they were selling the cookies. So and you can do that and close off the rest of the town hall.
Get your cookie and report a crime.
Exactly. But the point is to have a visible presence by the police on a regular basis downtown. It can be random, but regular, and to have 2 squad cars or 1 squad car sitting out there, and having people, say, it's there. We don't have to wait for them to get all the way. So that was intended by me to undercut the argument that we have to go to 3032 Court Street.
Right, you could have somebody. Anyway.
And just to clarify that earlier, also, if it fit, if the programming and police department fit on 32, maybe it changes a little bit, but the programming that they developed, it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Parking doesn't fit, the building's kind of, tight about access as well, secure access and so forth. So there's a little more than just parking, so it's like, it's a tough, so that kind of weighs into the decision too. If it fit, then it's like, okay, maybe the analysis is a little different.
But it has to be part of, that has to be part of the argument. I mean, just because the option's up here, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good option.
I mean, that's what LaValle says in the report too. They're saying, here's an option. It didn't.
Yeah, but they were too.
I don't know. That's exactly the problem that I have right now with the meeting that we had last week when I tried to ask those types of questions and saying it doesn't fit. I don't understand necessarily, and this may just be me, how we got, what was in between A and B, what was in between the questions that were asked of the chiefs. What I don't know, calculations or background premises, because I don't understand it. What went into getting those surveys to the chiefs into this building of this shape, of this size, exactly, that it doesn't fit? I don't understand as a layperson on a very tiny lot how you couldn't make it 3 stories or have an accessory parking lot. I don't understand when I'm looking at these documents where they don't have the current thing. That makes it really hard for me. And that's the number one thing I need is what are the current amounts for every single column? I can't read this without it. And then B, when I asked him how come it doesn't fit, he wouldn't answer me how come. He wouldn't tell me what was in between the program discussions and the building we got to. And so that's where I can't move past that into anything that you're talking about.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's actually
To color that, to answer that a little bit, is they went through the program and needs assessment with the chiefs, and the chiefs answered a whole questionnaire,
That all
gave it
makes
to
sense.
him,
Yep.
and then he went through it all and had a markup version. Do you have those? We still have those somewhere. Where he went through everything and marked it all up about what the needs, and you add all up that, and that's how you get there.
That's the part.
So
what he
that
did in the
raw
office,
data,
though.
I think we
No,
get.
the raw data I'm good with. It's what did he do as an architect that made the building shape look the way the building shape looks based on, I'm not worried about the raw data or the markups. It's what he did alone in his office that only maybe Chris can give me some insight into, that made it a two-story building of this shape.
Well,
It's a square.
Yeah.
It's a square based on,
It's a square.
he was trying to adhere to zoning setbacks and accommodate the parking, so.
But we
Dave,
couldn't have made it fit with 3 stories or.
Could make it, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's
you
more along the lines.
That's
reduce
what
the
I'm
footprint, you
Yeah.
go like this and you go
Exactly.
up.
That's what I thought.
Well, but I
Well, there's
think,
also maximum heights, but I think you could probably do 3 stories.
35. No, yeah, 35.
if you guys can do anything you want, like the town, right? I mean,
True.
honestly, you
That
know,
is a good point.
the ordinance doesn't apply to everybody else
Governmental
except for the town.
And I wrote down the setback
Governmental
thing,
land
like,
uses are exempt.
he went
from
within the
zoning.
set, like, he made better setbacks than exist. Like, the current setbacks are pretty bad.
Well, yeah,
And
right
he-
now the
he made it
building's right
better,
on the
so I'm
line.
just-
Yeah, well, that's a very old building.
Yeah.
That's there. The old-
But
do a lot of
the
that.
grandfather, like, right where the footprint is now is a lesser setback than he gave it, and I can't get past it.
Bob was a little defensive in that meeting at times, so.
Well,
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
But David, at some point, you
Yeah, he
guys must have,
didn't do his best at points, for sure. Like,
when you guys, I mean, there was all kinds of options that you guys went through. At some point, cost became an idea, right? You had to narrow this down. I mean, the option to develop 3032 Port Street for police is going to be more expensive,
Of course.
right? So I'm sure at some point they're like, well, that's more expensive. Let's focus on this.
Yeah.
Right, you're trying to get down to
Then it's
options.
common sense with, with the building.
Right.
A, we don't even know we have control of it to use
Yeah,
for
yeah,
police
yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Right,
That's one thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
that makes
we're
sense.
hoping we do, but, and then just the size of it, and it
Yeah.
just, and operationally, what I'm told, I'm not in public safety, but they're like multiple stories, 2's max, go to 3, it just
Yeah.
it doesn't work operationally. That's what I'm told. I
Yeah.
don't know that, then maybe they can.
No,
explain.
I agree.
Those are just all the points that I'm missing.
Yeah.
They're all, I'm
I
not
agree with
like
you.
stuck on an answer, I just want to know those small points, that's it.
But those are pretty critical, I think.
But I think that this is, to me, I think that, well, it sounds like all of us are kind of thinking as a preference would be there. And that's where I go back to the community input, because I think it would be, I think it's going to be more expensive to develop that. into the
I
police
think you could get a good feel, is the downtown thing for police?
Worth
you know,
doubling it.
Yes.
Is that a big selling point, or is it just bottom line dollars?
Right, because we're thinking that, but then you think about the neighbors and the abutters that have to
Yeah.
live with it. I mean, they're sure that they would like, no, get out of here.
Yeah, they'll come,
I mean,
they're gonna come unglued.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah,
But
then-
but in order to get the public to understand why 3032 Court Street might not be a viable option, we have to develop the kind of information,
Yeah.
whether it's a rough order of magnitude costs, or it's a degraded program,
Right.
and we have to get into how we measure degraded program, what percent of requirements
What gets sacrificed?
would we get rid of?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and
beyond just
that's the thing, Peter,
parking
like,
stuff.
Peter, I don't want to give up on that fight where you're like, 20 million, nobody's going to go for that. Well, why don't we get out there first and say, this is a sufficient thing, and we think it might cost 18 to 20 million dollars, and just start defending it. And then as time goes on, if we have to beat that back somehow, you can do that. But there's also a way of, we need to educate the public, like, hey, we want to do this, and this is what it costs. This is.
Yeah, I
Is there
understand.
any way, is the 20,
I'll answer that.
the 21, the 23, the 25 are all both? Is there any way we can separate them out and say X and Y? And I know it adds up to 20-something, but can we
Yeah.
stop calling it 20-something?
Yeah.
That's my point, because that's the way that was, after talking with the town
Yeah.
manager, that's how it's going to proceed with the warrant articles anyway.
I think it's
It's
easier to
phase one,
understand
phase two.
if
It's going
an
to-
X FD and a Y PD, and that adds up
Yeah.
to 22 or 25,
Yeah.
but I would rather just start separating them out.
Well, you can, but you have to let people know that there's another shoe that's going to drop.
No, I don't think that it's two separate things
Right,
or anything, but I'm just saying, every line is a this and a that, it's right next to each
Yeah,
other, and people can do math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what old option one is, and that in one sense is what new option one is. And any of the other options can absolutely be separated.
Can I go back to the idea about getting input as far as, before we get too far, about just getting some input from the community on the option, on the locations of this? I mean, I guess, we're trying to come up with our
Okay.
comments to
Yeah.
to Dave, right? So, I mean, I feel like that there is, like, we're thinking what we feel like the best options are, and I would agree that we could bring back the 3032 as a option 4. I think to be studied. Maybe that replaces option 3, but I would love to see others other community input on the police. I mean, basically, I think it makes the most sense for the fire department to stay downtown because not to avoid a permanent appointed substation chief, but at least for now that there's a case to be said that you don't have to have the substation somewhere. But I mean, I'd love to hear others about this because if the majority of the community said we don't care if the police department's downtown, then that's done, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that
there's no
takes it
reason
off
to
the table.
pursue
We don't have
it.
to worry about it anymore.
So I mean, how do we get that in? I mean, to me, the recommendation is get some community input really quick on.
I prefer it downtown, but I don't know any other good reason why not to yet, so.
And I don't live downtown, right? I live 2 miles from here, so I think it's great that you.
I'm
I'd love to
on the
come
other
downtown.
If we see if we can do like we did for the stakeholders committee and see if Bob can help us with a quick survey. We can push it on voting day, right? We can push it to people, hey, go to this, do a quick survey, and have maybe like 5 questions.
You have some information there is smart.
Yeah.
And we're
Something like that.
running close to it, but I think
Yeah, the problem with that is like when you say the majority of the community, right?
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
love to
I
hear
know.
from the majority.
Yeah.
But the
You're
reality,
going
Yeah.
to hear from 10% if you're lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I know.
that's, I mean, 10% is 1,600 people. We're not hearing from 1,600 people. I mean, the downtown traffic analysis was very controversial. Everyone loves to talk about parking. I mean, that is an issue. If you throw out there, you get
Right.
responses. We got 876. Granted, that's great, but it's 5% of the population. I would be shocked if we got even close to that.
I know, but what do you?
And then what do you do with that information? We've struggled with that. We get
Yeah.
42 comments back, and 35 of them say one way and 7 say the other way, but is that statistically significant to say that's representative of the whole community, or is
Yeah.
it just the 35 people that really had an act?
We got to try something, though.
I know.
No, we gotta try something,
Yeah.
I agree, but I'm just saying, like,
No, I hear you.
we
Yeah.
take it, but it's not like we just add it up and say, well, it's 28 to 25,
Right.
this wins, you know? It's, the
Right.
committee has to take it and
I
But
think
you're
make a
showing effort
decision.
though, right?
You're
saying, hey, we tried this and.
Absolutely.
and
You
then
tried
you-
it, and
I
also
want-
just starting to get it out there, and then maybe it'll spread.
And to that, hopefully, yeah, I will do that. And I know how to push it out, we can do that, but we need to be very specific and clear on what the questions are.
Yeah.
You know, survey questions
Yeah, they can't be
are
too
only
much.
as good as
gotta be
the
short.
question.
Well, in this
You know,
case, like
the
4 or
data is
5
only as good as the
questions.
question you ask.
Yeah.
And if you're overly broad or,
Well, so I mean, I've done a lot of surveys, but what the outcome that we want is to have input on both locations, right? I mean, on fire and police, we want to have input about what the community feels like is the best location. So, I mean, how do you word those questions? I mean, you could just simply say, we have an option to relocate police and fire to Continental Drive.
Well, not
Police.
relocate, just police.
please.
The
Well,
fire
It's a substation, but fire's staying downtown.
Oh, right, it's Holloway to
Yeah, yeah,
Bulkhead, right? It's Holloway to
Fire's
Bulkhead.
always going to be, not always, but, fire's downtown.
Okay, you want to include Holloway.
Well, no, but I guess, I mean, that's what the options are today, is that, and I think that makes the most sense, that fire's downtown.
Right.
But there was the option to move everybody out to Holland Way.
Yeah,
Or at least
but I'm
one
here to tell you
area.
that that's, I mean, again, personally, it's not worth the paper it's printed on.
Well, but I think it's for a survey question, you could say, I mean, this is where I feel like that you could offer to say, this is where you could work, I mean, I don't know who the survey expert is on town, but you could say that, there's an option to move police and fire together out on Holland Way. Would you support it, yes or no? Would you support it still if it's the most expensive option? And see what people say. You can get input like that.
Okay. I'll defer to you guys on that stuff, but I just.
I mean, I agree with you that it's a big ticket that I don't think people support, but I think that this is just going to help to get that input.
Yeah, I think it's all part of the
If
education
you
process.
feel it's necessary to have that less than representative input to go with your gut,
QR code at the vote.
to make choices, that's fine.
No, I don't, not to influence my decision. I think it's another data point to say that for the town to use. And so, yes, it's less than, I mean, I guess I wouldn't argue that it's less than representative. I mean, there's these survey consultants all the time that are going to say you should expect to get this percentage of survey responses and all that stuff,
But
right?
then the margin of error is such that it invalidates the,
But what other options do we have?
we don't have any other options.
Right, I mean, other than use somebody with a clipboard walking around to every house saying,
And I could be surprised, so we ought to ask about
And
all.
part of this, Peter, is
all
just to be
locations.
able to go back to people and say, if you came to them, let's say everybody jumped on board your option one and you took that to the polls, somebody's going to stand up and say, well, why didn't you look at this place, or why didn't you look at that place?
Yeah, I think
And
just
this
as
is
much
kind
as
of
we
that
wanted
process
to
to
hear the other
educate
options, it's
people.
nice to just let people see these
Yeah,
were
this is-
considered.
yeah.
And very
agree.
likely it could just get
I agree.
no interest. And you can put a couple of, I think it'd be nice to put a couple of the things that we have learned, right? Like, okay, would you still consider it if it meant the, heat coverage was 40%, and now it's no thanks. I don't support it anymore because
Right.
it doesn't cover most of the town, right?
Yeah,
But
you
it,
could-
like Mark is saying, it can be a base question and a couple follow-ups. Those follow-ups can be a teaching opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's the
learn.
education.
Okay, I did like that, now I don't. Okay, now I like this, and it sort of
Yeah.
shakes out.
I mean, the Valley, I'm sure, has done a bunch of these. They may have
Yes.
some, they may be able to, I don't know.
We got Exeter to help us out.
Yeah.
He's got it.
I mean, you can't overcomplicate it because then you won't get anyone. They'll start
Right.
like, screw this, I'm not finishing this survey, right?
Yeah, a few questions.
Yeah.
But all I want to know, all I'm hearing is, all you want to know is if the people feel the PD downtown or not, right? Is that all?
Part of it, well, also, and just to let them know, like, these are the other sites that were explored, and,
Oh, but in the survey,
Yeah.
for the survey question.
well, in the survey,
I think the
if you
survey
could
serves
say
two
Holland Way.
purposes. It's
Pardon me?
one, I think the survey is two purposes. I think
Okay.
we have some information we might like to hear, but we also don't want to feel like we pushed it in one direction. So it also serves the purpose of, it was an opportunity to learn. I think it's a dual purpose.
No, okay, no, that's not my question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I guess is what the information we want to
That
ask.
we want out of it,
Yeah, the data we want to get, we want to see if people prefer the police
Right.
department downtown or
Yeah.
not.
downtown or not.
Right.
And then is there anything else?
Substation viability, I think, is maybe worth asking about, right?
Well, I know that's part of the plans, but Peter, you've spoken about how that's not flown much in the
Yes,
past.
and I've been a pretty, as Chief Wilkie knows, I've been really skeptical of the whole idea of a substation. But I'm the first to tell you that I'll be happy to support strongly a substation if we get to a $12.9 million price tag. And that's an operational perspective for me based on the chief, and it's a fiscal thing. But if you ask the question, do you think there ought to be a substation on on Continental Drive, you're probably going to get people to say no, because they're only going to think of the $2.5 million proposal that's come around every year since, not every year, almost every year since 2003 or 2007.
Yeah.
That's been automatically slammed.
I don't even think it needs to be mentioned in a survey necessarily. I mean, it's
So what do we want to get
police
out of the survey?
We'll educate them, we'll point them back to the planning website with the videos and the documents,
Yeah.
and then we'll ask a few questions.
Are there any other data points we want besides downtown or
Do you want
not?
to touch upon price?
Well,
I don't think we.
I don't think
Well,
we
I mean, how do you
touch
touch upon how?
I don't know, like, what's the most you're willing, what's,
Yeah, zero. Less than one.
I mean, I wouldn't even answer that. No, I mean, because I'm willing to spend a lot more than that.
Well, so we started
Zero.
to say, hi, would you pay over 30 million for
Well,
these?
part of
And
the
then-
whole budgeting discussion too revolves on what's retiring and kind of like that spreadsheet of,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say cash flow, but debt service coming on board versus debt service being retired kind of thing. And, maybe this slips in there somewhere and it's not as egregious as you
Well,
would think.
maybe.
Maybe.
Do you want to ask questions in the survey? Like, have you watched? Do you understand?
Are you aware?
Are you aware? You want to ask questions like that to see what?
Yeah.
Well, that's not bad because it also introduces them to the link to the information.
Yeah, I mean, just as a data point to say how.
Yeah, I
much
would just
is
say,
the-
are you aware that there's a
This
study going
video,
on for a new public
this study.
safety complex? Absolutely. Yeah, because I don't think the awareness is out there for it at all.
And I think you can say the current facilities are either less than optimal or deficient or whatever. I mean, I think that we ought to make the point that we got to do something.
So you want to ask a question like that to say that? Do you agree that the existing public safety complex is?
Well,
Well, I would make that the well, I don't know.
I wouldn't say,
This is
do you
getting a
think
bit
it is? Because
Yeah, I don't want to really complicate it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering as far as just to see what the community feeling, I mean, yeah,
Let's,
obviously gonna work.
let's have somebody write the bare bones set of questions, and I'm the first person to tell you, I'm not certain I know.
I don't mind taking a stab at it, but I still don't feel like I know what we just want to get out of it besides the education pieces. What else do we want to be able to sit at this table and say, X number of people said Y,
Right.
besides downtown?
Yeah, one of
Anything
the
else?
things is the police downtown. I guess the other thing is that education piece about the three options, the
Yeah.
Holland Way, Continental Drive, downtown.
Well,
Are we going to ask for a new third option or new fourth option?
Well, not in the survey, I don't think, but I mean, one of the recommendations we're going to write for La Valley Brensinger is,
right.
pursue, well, potentially.
I think if you want, I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if it's unnecessarily going to prolong the survey, but I think you ought to talk about 20X million, and you ought to say we've been presented three options. They each cost $20 to $25 million, and these are the bare bones, if you will. There's a sentence that describes each one of them. Is that something you're willing to support? And Chris, I might be completely wrong. That they're going to, even if you get it down to 18, they might say, yeah, got it.
I'm not even saying they'll support paying something higher. I think we're all would like to pay less. I'm just saying there's a cost to doing these things, and it's just simply realistic.
Right. So then the question is, do you put a band in? I'm sorry.
I just feel like, I'm getting a little lost here in the weeds.
Yeah.
We have three options. They have price tags. We also said maybe we'd like to just hear a very, even less specific on the subpoints, but a price tag for what would cost to be downtown. And then we can just say, give four options with information embedded on each one and just ask which one they like the best right now.
Yeah.
I think we just go back to simple because this is getting weedy.
Yeah.
I think we should let the survey people I think it's good that we give them some direction.
That would be me.
Then never mind, we should give them the weeds.
Well, no, I really don't think, honestly, at 6 o'clock, I don't think we're going to design a survey.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
And Dave,
I think we need that
And we're not
fourth
going to be able to
option
get it
for
for
the
the
survey.
vote. I mean, if we were asking one question, if a new Exeter police station was built, would you prefer that the police station remains downtown? Yes, no, unsure. And if yes, would you feel the same way that keeping the police station downtown was the more expensive option?
I like that.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
but that's okay. But now we're getting into, you were the town is a value, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I would
then
need
it
to
gets-
sit down and really work these out
Yeah.
if we were going to do that. So maybe we do that. Maybe we say, okay, we're not going to do a survey. We'll come back with questions. I'll come back with some questions that I think are, maybe something we want to get out of the public, and I'll bring them back to the committee next month, and you can vet them out, because it's not, you don't need to know right now. I mean, our process is okay. I mean, we're looking at getting something into the CIP by, in front of the planning board in August. So-
I agree. I think this is valuable input for you to help finalize your options. though, right?
Absolutely.
You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'm getting
Yeah.
off, let's not get in the weeds about what the exact, just what you want to hear, kind of broad brush, what do you?
If it's going to inform whether we ask La Valley Brensinger for a fourth option, then that question being asked first is perfect. Because if that question comes back and then that informs ask for the downtown numbers or not, then it makes sense to me. Or are we asking for the downtown numbers simultaneously? Like chicken and egg here.
I think we should let Dave develop the questions a little bit further.
The one question I think is perfect, and then we know if people want to hear a downtown number or not.
But you could also just add that same question for the fire department. Right, you could ask a very similar question to that. You could say, would you exactly this? Not exactly the same, but you could ask the same type of question. Keeping the fire department downtown. I mean, just to see. I mean, if you're going to ask a survey, just ask the same question. Do you want to see the fire department stay downtown? I don't know. You could. I mean, I would. So yes, I understand what you're saying. I still think it's worth the value because they have the option to keep it there. I think it just needs a little bit more work to be able to go through. So. I think as a committee, I would
So
recommend.
both.
Yes.
I have
yes.
no preference. I'm just trying to figure it
Yeah,
out.
I agree. let Dave work on the survey. I think for us, for our committee, we should develop our.
We should develop our recommendations. We're not going to do that now, so.
Okay.
I'll send mine off to everybody. I just
Yeah, we'll have to just start emailing stuff around. to
Well,
individuals.
we should email it all to one person, so it's not a meeting.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Right.
Whoever gets the input, send them to.
Yeah, you can send them to me, yeah. I'll put it all together. I'll put it together and spit it back out.
And that would be the questions that we all think,
Yeah.
the information we need, like Amanda's questions, which were really.
I'm doing mine right now, Chris, because mine are just really easy.
Now, if we did the police department first, what would happen to the dirt floor data room that's in the fire department now? I was aghast on our tour. I think that's the one thing that really...
Oh, the town's IT backbone.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, that's, I mean, again,
That's the whole town, that's not just
Yeah,
BD.
I know,
the
that's
whole
why
town.
That's
I saw
gonna
that
change.
thing.
I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, would that be built in the first tranche of construction with this project? Or as long as the fire department is not renovated, is that still the backbone, I guess?
Well, I think there's probably an argument that says that it ought to be somewhere, there ought to be a new one, even if it's a
Yeah.
closet in an enclosed, police department parking lot, somewhere away from, the dirt floor and but
Yeah, that's
not-
neither here nor
I
there.
can't
But
believe
I
it.
just, that's the one thing I'm like, oh my God.
no one's going to pitch a fit about spending money for that. I hope.
Yeah.
If they do, I'm more than happy to argue with them.
Just to be clear, we're not asking anything of the public at this point, in the near future.
I think we should.
We're going to design.
Well, I mean,
Let's see the questions.
It was one.
yeah, there's got to be survey questions, I guess. I'm not sure, Dave, how we get to that gap, how we bridge the gap from now to giving LaValley more specific direction on what to pursue. I think there does have to be a kind of a public interaction in there somewhere, just to get feedback on the options that they've developed.
Yeah, I mean, what our thinking was is have the first public forum in April.
Okay.
That's what we're thinking, have the
LaValley-
first public forum, try to generate some interest and have people show up.
And that's going to be on like the format for the master plan.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe tied with something else that's happening, so that there's another draw for people to come. Maybe free pizza night or something like that.
Bingo, raffle,
Yeah.
four prizes.
Yeah.
Tonight, hand out free
Yeah.
cupcakes. But yeah, something like that. I don't know.
I don't either.
It's a good idea, but
I don't either, but
usually if you provide like snacks and childcare, you get a little
Yeah.
more interest,
Yeah.
or food and childcare, but.
there's not much happening in April anyways.
I mean, we can provide feedback. Hopefully over the next week, we'll give our feedback on the presentation. LBA can chew on that, respond to that as they wish. I'm not sure if there's much else they would do before that April meeting then either, so I'm not sure what you're looking for them to do between now and then. Or if they can just kind of cool their jets until we do that.
Well, the April's flexible. I said, that's what I envisioned, like, it's
Yeah.
not gonna be, so if we have some, if it bumps up, if you're working on the 2023 warrant, that's a goal. There is a time frame, and, because you don't want to be introducing it in, December to the select board, and the planning board doesn't have a chance to review it and put it in their capital improvement program. The budget committee doesn't have a chance to, you want to be all buttoned up by mid-August
Right.
if you're going for the 2023 warrant. So
That's why,
just trying
yeah.
to keep it on that schedule, because I think that's where we're trying to shoot for. And, I think that's reasonable. We have time to do it.
Yeah, and I think getting that public exposure and getting some feedback, getting some number out there, we'll ask LaValley to sharpen their pencil on the estimates that they included in their initial report, but at least to get that out there. And then as we work through the process after that with the public, we can try to find ways to save money if that becomes a gating issue.
So you're going to be clear to me, though, because I'll about sharpening your pencil and what that actually means. Because I think, I think it wasn't LaValley who did it. They subbed it out to a professional
Right.
cost estimator. And I don't know if he can provide information, specifics, I think, of how he got there and what escalating factor and so forth. And they are going to do that. I'm not sure they're going to come up with different.
Is that Joe?
No, I
Until they
agree.
say, okay,
Yeah.
this is a rough, it's a rough
Right,
order
right,
of magnitude.
yeah.
When we get a decision, we can look at a site and start putting a conceptual design together for that site, not just a rectangle and some parking. Then they'll be able to sharpen their pencil. I
So
don't
the
think before
deliverable,
then they can.
the deliverable from La Valley was a concept design,
Yes,
one option.
yes, under the contract.
Right, so one option, concept design with an estimate.
Correct.
So this is all to get to that one option with a concept design.
Yes.
Correct.
So to me, that's where these rough order magnitude estimates were only to help decide these options.
Yes.
And that's where I don't
Compare
feel
the
like,
options to each other.
right, just to understand that option one is less or more expensive than the other options.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason for this stuff. And that's why I don't feel like it's a good idea to start showing everybody, this is a $20 to $25 million, because I just don't know, we may be able, by the time the concept design is done, it may get down to 15 to 20 or something like that. I don't know, that's just my opinion, that these are really, this is where I don't care about the escalation that they're using, just use it in current year dollars. Because it doesn't matter what it's going to, it's a guess to what it's going to be next year or 2 years from now, right? Just use numbers based on now, because you're trying to decide which option, the cost of each option, not to go to the cheapest option either. That's, at least I wouldn't recommend. Well, I don't know what to recommend, because I don't know what the options are yet. But
And then the other part of the budget discussion, Peter, in your discussions with the BRC, they have a number in mind, it sounds like.
No, that was the DPW garage.
Oh, okay.
They don't know anything about this other than what I told them.
I guess I'm just wondering if their number, if they had one, if it was
No,
informed by
no, they don't
some
have-
sort of cash flow analysis between, debt service analysis. and things like that.
They don't know, they don't have a number to the point, if they have one. Corey didn't say anything to me. I think he would have said, yeah, we were thinking about this. A. B, the only reaction I've gotten in the last year or so from anybody in the budget committee is not insignificant one, and that is Judy Rowan said, hey, let's talk about this Taj Mahal police and fire department want to build downtown. Okay? Now, she happens to be the chairperson of the police fire subcommittee. So, she's going to be inherently skeptical of anything. But she's also a very smart person. So if there's a good case to be made, she'd probably acknowledge it, even if she disagreed with the number. So,
Well, she
they're not there
she
yet.
also doesn't want just a cement block building.
Right, again, we have an obligation, and hopefully the process will, at the end of the day, the process will be something that the budget committee can sign off on.
I was just
as
wondering
well.
if they had a number that they felt kind of fit without impacting the tax rate too much. They don't,
I don't
that's
believe they
fine.
have yet.
Because I didn't know if that's kind of a number to start keeping in mind and trying to work towards or not. That's all.
Well, right, no, the only number to keep in mind,
They don't have one.
as far as the budget committee is concerned, is the less.
Right,
is better.
yeah, agreed, yeah.
That's all,
yeah.
at this point.
All right,
When we have enough to take to them and say to them, this is why the number's this,
yeah.
then
All right.
then that's something we should do.
I guess let's wrap up unless anybody else has any more comments, questions. So, yeah, send me your questions and stuff. I'll put it together in some sort of document, send it back out, and we'll try to get something back, Dave, hopefully by the end of next week, I guess.
That's,
Yeah. And I think this meeting would be in lieu of our next facility meeting, I think, in the beginning of March.
it's up to you guys. It's on my calendar, so.
I'm not here next week.
when is the
Whatever
meeting?
the first Thursday in March is, I was thinking if we did this,
Oh, yeah,
we could probably
that's
skip that meeting.
third or that's the third?
Yeah, that's next week.
Is next week?
Yeah, I'm not here.
I'm not here.
It's a
so-
short month.
I'm not
You're not
here.
even here,
It's
so-
school vacation.
Yeah, so we'll probably skip that meeting, and then we'll just
Be here on the 17th.
try to get this draft done and return that. That'll be our homework for the
Do we
week.
bring beer on the 17th?
I'll bring my cranberry juice.
When's your last meeting?
I think my last meeting is the second Thursday in
In
April.
April, all right.
We're gonna find some new members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be a pain in your guys' ear and girls.
All right, I guess
Till then.
we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor of adjourn?
Aye.
Bye.
Meeting's over.
I don't know if we finished later or early.
We finished early. It's 6:30, with a hard stop because.
I had big plans
select
that we
board's
were gonna
coming.
get like a
So we got-
nice
we got-
letter written out of this. and that's-
People, you have to go to the select board meeting too?
I do not.
Well,
I don't.
I had one, but you guys didn't want to send that letter. Had that letter written.